The silence inside the convent walls was not peace. It was the chilling, held breath of history, waiting for the boot to drop. You think your sanctuary is safe? The 17th century proved that even faith could be incinerated by the relentless mechanism of imperial power. They had dedicated their lives to quiet contemplation, only to become the loudest, unspoken victims of a vast, unforgiving empire. Dust motes danced in the single stained glass beam, illuminating the exact spot where devotion ended and the terrifying sharp edge of change began. Imagine surrendering everything for piety, only to find that your ritual robes became the uniform for your own severe suffering. The year is 1683. We begin not on the battlefield, but in the echoing chambers of a minor convent nestled deep within the Balkans, a fragile Christian enclave absorbed into the expanding shadow of the Ottoman Empire. To understand the collapse, you must first understand the quiet dignity that preceded it. These nuns, the brides of Christ, lived a life governed by the measured rhythm of bells, vows of silence, and candlelight. Their world a meticulously ordered, deliberate rejection of the chaotic, shifting political landscape surrounding them. Yet the vast, powerful machinery of the port required absolute conformity, and such deliberate separation was seen not as faith, but as a dangerous, symbolic resistance. This tranquility was merely the heavy silence before the inevitable, devastating storm. Focus now, not on the sprawling glory of Constantinople, but on the isolated, cracked cobblestones leading to the convent gates. You are standing here, feeling the cold, damp air rising off the stone. The atmosphere is one of profound, yet unnoticed, tension. These women, the quiet historians of their own faith, preserved ancient texts and rituals, acting as living archives in an era defined by brutal, rapid change. Their prayers were whispered. Their influence, however, reached far into the homes of dissenting local populations, providing a spiritual core that the central authority could neither fully penetrate nor tolerate. This hidden strength became their greatest liability. The stakes were simple yet terrifyingly absolute: assimilation or eradication. The Ottoman drive for secure, unified borders meant eliminating the internal dissonances, those communities that maintained autonomous allegiance, be it political or spiritual. The convent was a microcosm of this friction. Imagine the routine, the careful turning of pages in the flickering monastic library, each illumination a defiance, each copied scripture a seed of memory planted against the imperial demand for uniform submission. The first sign of trouble often wasn't the sound of marching armies, but the chilling disappearance of local protectors. As the empire faced external pressure, particularly from the burgeoning Habsburg and Venetian powers, the internal grip tightened with ferocious speed. This necessitated a purge of any potential fifth column, and the religious orders, particularly those associated with the former Byzantine influence, became prime targets for the application of imperial will. The quiet ritual of the daily Vespers, once a source of comfort, now carried the heavy weight of inevitable disruption. It was a countdown marked not by seconds, but by the slow deterioration of protective political structures. The Mother Superior, known in some accounts as Helena, carried the weight of the entire community on her bowed shoulders. Her power was entirely moral, entirely focused on the preservation of the spiritual integrity of her sisters. Her decisions were tactical, hiding relics, destroying incriminating historical records, teaching the younger novices how to speak only in carefully neutral phrases. You must understand the level of calculated risk involved in every ordinary action. Even fetching water became an act of observational intelligence, reading the mood of the passing Janissary patrol. Every day was a small, agonizing negotiation with fear. The symbolic nature of the nuns' habit, the austere dark robes and veils, transitioned dramatically from representing devotion to representing resistance. To the local Ottoman officials, these women were the stubborn, visible emblems of a faith refusing to fade. Their very existence mocked the narrative of seamless imperial expansion. This ideological clash, far more dangerous than any political uprising, meant that their destruction would be methodical and symbolic, a deliberate display of power designed to shatter the spirit of the wider populace. But this wasn't the end of their story. The official decree arrived, not as a shout of war, but as a dry, official parchment delivered by a low-ranking officer, its seal heavy and cold. The demands were impossible. Immediate conversion, surrender of all valuable relics and land deeds, and the complete dismantling of their established way of life. You feel the brittle texture of the parchment, the cold certainty of the empire contained within its formal script. The air in the scriptorium suddenly feels thick, suffocating. The decision to refuse, a quiet, principled refusal, was perhaps the most profound act of resistance in their entire lives. The silence that followed the refusal was more terrifying than any threat. It allowed the mind to conjure the possibilities of the severe suffering that lay ahead. The atmosphere shifts dramatically. The warm smell of beeswax and old paper is replaced by the raw, metallic scent of fear, and the distant sounds of men gathering outside the walls. Their ritual objects, the silver crucifixes and worn prayer beads, suddenly felt less like symbols of solace and more like dangerous evidence. The intervention, when it came, was characterized by chilling control. This was not a chaotic riot. It was a measured application of force designed for maximum psychological impact. Imagine the sound of the main door splintering, a sharp, violent sound cutting through decades of solemn quiet. The light is immediately harsh, revealing dust motes and the startled, pale faces of the women caught between their vows and the brute force of imperial command. You see the long shadows cast by the invading figures, stretching across the polished stone floor. The first systematic act was the violation of dignity. Their sacred space was immediately desecrated. Altars were overturned, icons smashed, and the meticulously ordered library scattered. The historical knowledge these women protected cast aside as meaningless debris. This destruction of ritual space was central to the process. It was designed to show that no place was truly holy, that the Sultan's writ superseded divine protection. The women watched, immobilized by a mixture of shock and the absolute certainty of their collective fate. The purge itself became a controlled spectacle. The women were separated and subjected to relentless questioning, demanding the location of hidden gold, the names of local rebels, and information regarding other Christian networks. Historical accounts use the term severe suffering to describe the methods employed, the deliberate denial of comfort, the exposure to the elements, and psychological pressure. The goal was extraction of information, certainly, but also the complete breaking of the spirit. Shift your focus now to the tiny courtyard, where the only light comes from a single high window. The sound of forced confessions and whispered prayers mingled with the detached organizational instructions of the officers. The ritual aspect of their downfall was terrifying. It often centered around the forced removal of their religious attire. The veil, the symbol of their dedication, was violently torn away, an act intended to strip them of both spiritual protection and social identity. The cruelty was rarely random. It was structured, following an internal logic of intimidation. Those who remained defiant were subjected to prolonged exposure, designed to turn the community against itself through forced complicity and exhausting observation. One recorded account details how the sisters were compelled to stand for days, their tired bodies leaning against the remnants of the broken altar, a horrifying tableau of religious subjugation. The Ottoman officials documented their actions with bureaucratic precision. This chilling record-keeping, the lists of confiscated property, the summaries of interrogation results, allows us today to piece together the narrative of their final hours. The efficiency of the purge speaks to a systematic policy, not a localized outburst of violence. It highlights the vast, impersonal scale of imperial control that crushed the personal, localized resistance of the convent. The key to understanding this specific atrocity lies in the power dynamic. These women represented the symbolic core of a defeated culture. Eliminating them meant eradicating the hope of future resurgence. The ritual nature of their suffering was designed to be publicly understood, a warning etched into the memory of every local Christian family. This is the value burst. History is often written in the small, agonizing details of the powerless. Yet, even under extreme pressure, acts of internal resistance persisted. Some accounts suggest the sisters communicated coded messages through ancient prayers, transferring hidden knowledge and courage through liturgical phrases. The simple act of maintaining silence when demanded to renounce their vows became their final, powerful political statement. They controlled the only thing left to them, their internal assent. The psychological warfare escalated dramatically when the officers began to destroy the convent's vital spiritual anchors, the ancient icons and relics believed to possess protective power. To see the physical manifestation of their faith pulverized was, for the women, arguably a greater trauma than physical pain. It was the absolute, final, existential assault on their reason for being. The climax of the purge was often marked by forced relocation or immediate condemnation. The most senior members, particularly Mother Helena, faced a tragic end. The historical records are often deliberately vague on the immediate mechanism of their deaths, preferring the clean term condemned. The truth, filtered through the safe language of historical reporting, remains a horrifying testament to the consequences of defying absolute power. What came next changed everything for the local community. The immediate aftermath was defined by an emptiness far heavier than the convent's previous tranquility. The structure was often converted into a barracks or administrative outpost, its sacred purpose erased by layers of imperial occupation. The silence returned. But it was a dead silence, the oppressive quiet of conquered space, haunted by the memory of ritual and suffering. The true legacy of the nuns was not in the physical structure they lost, but in the dissemination of their story. The fleeing novices and the local peasants who witnessed the events carried the narrative into neighboring territories. These stories, passed down in hushed tones around winter fires, became the bedrock of regional resistance and cultural memory. They became martyrs, providing a spiritual anchor for a community struggling to survive under absolute control. Decades passed. The Ottoman grip waxed and waned, but the site of the convent remained a powerful, symbolic scar on the landscape. Imagine the ruins, decades later, overgrown with tenacious ivy, the broken stones retaining a residual chill that speaks of past terror. This physical decay mirrors the moral decay that power, when left unchecked, inevitably brings upon itself. The role of the quiet historians today is to sift through the heavily filtered imperial archives and the often exaggerated folk accounts to find the core truth. We search for the specific, documented acts of courage, the small, personal victories against overwhelming oppression that reveal the complex tapestry of historical conflict. The task is not to sensationalize, but to restore dignity to the condemned. We find clues in the financial records, a sudden cessation of tithes, a notation of reallocation of assets, and the transfer of property ownership to a military authority. These cold, bureaucratic entries are the final, detached epitaphs for lives devoted to spiritual service. The ledger book becomes a silent witness to a systematic purge. The narrative of the convent purge serves as a chilling case study in the dynamics of assimilation. It demonstrates that power often seeks to destroy not the body, but the core identity, forcing a choice between profound conviction and painful survival. This struggle is timeless, repeating across eras and empires. The spiritual ritual, once the reason for their quiet existence, became the means of their remembrance. The surviving Christian communities wove the tragedy into their own services, transforming the loss into a sustained act of collective memory. Their suffering became a dark, necessary thread in the larger historical cloak of their faith. The historical irony is profound. By attempting to silence these women absolutely, the Ottoman administration inadvertently amplified their voices through martyrdom. Their fate, intended as a warning, became instead an enduring source of inspiration for defiance against cultural annihilation. Neutrality. We must recognize that the deepest historical understanding comes not from grand battles, but from observing how institutions, be they empires or convents, handle their moments of greatest vulnerability and stress. The collapsed walls tell a more intimate, agonizing truth than any monument. The final meditation returns us to the symbolic object, the simple wooden cross often found near the convent sites. It stands, weathered and unadorned, a testament to the enduring human capacity to hold faith, even when everything else has been violently taken away. It is the ultimate statement against the temporary nature of brute power. This video is created for educational and historical purposes. It examines themes of power, corruption, and human conflict without depicting explicit or graphic events. The focus is on the human cost of imperial expansion and the quiet resistance found in moments of profound suffering. The silence of those historical shadows remains heavy. If this story made you reflect on the fragility of power and the strength of enduring conviction, you're welcome to continue the journey with us as we uncover more chapters of human history hidden in plain sight.